The morning sun rose over the human colony of New Haven, but it brought no warmth to the people who lived there. 12 years had passed since the Cathari Empire conquered Earth and scattered humanity across the stars like dust in the wind. The aliens had taken everything. They had taken their homes, their freedom, and their pride. Now humans worked in mines and factories, serving masters who looked at them the way a farmer looks at cattle. New Haven was one of many colonies where humans lived under alien rule. The buildings were old and broken. The streets were covered in dirt and dust. The people walked with their heads down, because looking up meant catching the eye of a Cathari soldier. And that never ended well. Daniel Harper woke up that morning the same way he woke up every morning. His body hurt from working in the mines. His hands were rough and cut. His back ached from carrying heavy loads. He was 38 years old, but he looked much older. That was what life under the Cathari did to a person. He looked at his daughter, Lucy, who was still sleeping on her small bed in the corner of their tiny room. She was 7 years old, with brown hair and brown eyes that still held some light in them. Daniel had worked hard to protect that light. He told her stories about Earth, about blue oceans and green forests, about a time when humans walked free under their own sky. Lucy was all he had left. His wife Maria had died 3 years ago in a Cathari labor camp. They had taken her because she spoke back to a guard. Daniel never saw her again. He received a message 2 weeks later telling him she was dead. No explanation. No body to bury. Just a cold message on a screen. He woke Lucy gently. They had to get to the market early to collect their food rations. The Cathari gave humans just enough food to keep them working, but never enough to make them strong. The streets of New Haven were already busy when they stepped outside. Humans moved quietly, going about their business with their eyes on the ground. Nobody talked loudly. Nobody laughed. Laughter attracted attention, and attention attracted punishment. Daniel held Lucy's hand as they walked. She carried a small ball made of cloth, her only toy. He had made it for her 2 years ago from scraps of old clothing. She loved that ball more than anything else in the world. The market was a large open area in the center of the colony. Humans lined up at stations to receive their rations. Cathari. Guards stood at every corner, watching with their cold reptilian eyes. The aliens were tall, almost 8 feet, with green-scaled skin and 4 fingers on each hand. Their faces showed no emotion that humans could read. To them, humans were just another conquered species, barely worth noticing. Daniel and Lucy took their place in line. The wait was long, but nobody complained. Complaining was dangerous. That was when Commander Zelitha arrived. Her patrol ship descended from the sky with a sound like thunder. Dust flew everywhere as it landed in the center of the market. The humans backed away quickly, making room. Nobody wanted to be close to a Cathari commander. Zelitha stepped out of her ship, followed by 2 armored guards. She was different from the regular soldiers. Her uniform was decorated with symbols that marked her high rank. Her scales were darker, almost black, and her eyes were the color of old blood. She had commanded Sector 7 for 3 years, and in that time, she had earned a reputation for cruelty. She walked through the market slowly, looking at the humans the way someone might look at insects. Her guards walked behind her, their weapons ready. Nobody moved. Nobody breathed too loudly. Lucy had gotten bored during the long wait. She was bouncing her cloth ball gently against the ground, watching it come back up to her hands. It was a simple game, something to pass the time. Daniel was watching the food line move forward and did not notice when Lucy bounced the ball a little too hard. The ball rolled away from her. Lucy let go of her father's hand and ran after it without thinking. She was just a child doing what children do. The ball stopped at Commander Zelitha's feet. Lucy stopped too, suddenly realizing where she was. She looked up at the massive alien standing above her. Xylitha's red eyes looked down at the small human child who had dared to cross her path. The entire market went silent. Every human stopped moving. Every eye turned to watch what would happen next. Daniel's heart stopped beating for a moment. He wanted to run to his daughter, to grab her and pull her away, but his body would not move. Fear had frozen him in place like ice. Lucy did not understand the danger she was in. She was only 7. She did not know the rules the way adults did. She stood there, looking up at the alien commander with confusion on her face, not sure what she was supposed to do. "Move, creature," Xylitha commanded. Her voice was cold and sharp like broken glass. Lucy heard the words, but fear had taken hold of her small body. Her legs would not obey. She stood frozen, her brown eyes wide, her cloth ball lying in the dust at the alien's feet. In Cathari culture, hesitation was the same as defiance. A subject who did not obey immediately was challenging their master's authority. It did not matter that Lucy was just a child. It did not matter that she was scared. Xylitha saw only disrespect. Her four-fingered hand came down fast and hard. The back of her hand struck Lucy across the face with enough force to lift the small girl off her feet. Lucy flew backward and landed in the dirt, her cloth ball forgotten, her face already swelling where the blow had landed. The sound of the strike echoed across the silent market. Daniel found his legs again. He ran to his daughter and dropped to his knees beside her. Blood was coming from her lip. A dark bruise was forming on her cheek. Tears ran down her face as she cried silently, because even at 7 years old, she had learned that crying loudly was dangerous. Daniel held her in his arms and looked up at Commander Xylitha. Something was happening inside him. Something that had been buried deep for 12 years was waking up. His hands were shaking, but not from fear. They were shaking from rage. Xylitha looked down at the human man and his injured child. She felt nothing. They were insects to her. Less than insects. She had disciplined thousands of humans during her command, and she would discipline thousands more. This moment meant nothing to her, but she was wrong. This moment would mean everything. From the crowd, a woman stepped forward. Her name was Grace Bennett, and she had been watching carefully. She was 42 years old, with gray hair and calm eyes that hid a fire burning underneath. Before the invasion, she had been a captain in the human military. After the invasion, she had become something else entirely. Grace walked to Daniel and Lucy. She knelt down and helped the child sit up. She wiped the blood from Lucy's lip with gentle hands. Then she stood and looked directly into Xylitha's red eyes. No human looked directly at a Cathari commander. It was forbidden. It was dangerous. It was the kind of thing that got people killed. Grace did it anyway. "You will regret that," she said. Her voice was quiet but steady. Xylitha laughed. The sound was strange, a clicking noise that came from deep in her throat. Another human with empty threats. How amusing. She gestured to her guards. "Take her to the processing center. She needs to learn her place." The guards moved forward to grab Grace. The crowd watched in horror. Everyone knew what happened at the processing center. People went in and they did not come out the same. Some did not come out at all. But Grace did not look scared. She looked at Daniel and gave him a small nod. Then she looked back at Xylitha and smiled. It was not the smile of someone who had been defeated. It was the smile of someone who had been waiting for exactly this moment. As the guards took her arms, Grace spoke one more time. "The Emperor will hear about New Haven. I promise you that." Xylitha dismissed the words as meaningless. She turned and walked back to her ship, already forgetting the incident. It was just another day of keeping humans in their place. Nothing important had happened. She could not have been more wrong. Daniel watched Grace being led away. He held Lucy tight against his chest and made a silent promise to his daughter, to his dead wife, to every human who had suffered under alien rule. Things were about to change. The sun had set over New Haven, but Daniel Harper could not sleep. Lucy lay in her bed with a cold cloth pressed against her swollen face. The bruise had turned dark purple. Every time Daniel looked at it, he felt the rage inside him grow stronger. He thought about Grace Bennett. He thought about the way she had looked at Commander Xylitha without fear. He thought about her words. She had said the Emperor would hear about New Haven. What did that mean? How could a human prisoner make an Emperor hear anything? A soft knock came at his door. 3 knocks, then 2, then 1. Daniel had never heard that pattern before, but something told him it was important. He walked to the door and opened it slowly. His neighbor Samuel Price stood outside. Samuel was a quiet man in his 50s who worked in the recycling center. Daniel had known him for 5 years, but they had never been close. Samuel kept to himself. "Can I come in?" Samuel asked. His voice was low, barely above a whisper. Daniel stepped aside and let him enter. Samuel looked around the small room, checking the windows, checking the corners. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small device. He pressed a button and a soft blue light came on. "This blocks their listening devices," Samuel explained. "We can talk freely now." Daniel stared at his neighbor. The quiet man from the recycling center suddenly looked different. He stood straighter. His eyes were sharp and alert. This was not the Samuel that Daniel thought he knew. "Who are you?" Daniel asked. Samuel smiled. "I am the same person I have always been. But there are things about me that I have kept hidden. Things that I am going to show you now." He paused. "What happened to your daughter today was terrible. But it was also the signal we have been waiting for." "Signal? What are you talking about?" "Come with me," Samuel said. "There are people who want to meet you. People who have been fighting the Cathari in secret for 12 years. Daniel looked at Lucy sleeping in her bed. He did not want to leave her alone, but he needed answers. He needed to understand what was happening. "She will be safe," Samuel said, reading his thoughts. "I have people watching this building. Nothing will happen to her while we are gone." Daniel made his decision. He followed Samuel out into the night. They walked through dark streets and empty alleys. Samuel moved with purpose, taking turns that seemed random but clearly followed a planned route. They stopped at an old building that used to be a storage facility. The walls were cracked and the windows were broken. It looked abandoned. Samuel pressed his hand against a spot on the wall that looked like all the other spots. A hidden panel slid open. Behind it was a stairway leading down into the earth. They descended into darkness. The stairs went deeper than Daniel expected, far below the surface of the colony. Finally, they reached a heavy metal door. Samuel knocked in a pattern, and the door swung open. Daniel stepped inside and stopped breathing. The underground room was huge, carved out of solid rock. Dozens of people moved about, working at stations filled with equipment that Daniel did not recognize. Weapons were stacked against the walls. Maps and screens showed images of Cathari ships and military bases. This was not a hiding place. This was a military operation. A man approached them. He was older than Samuel, maybe 60, with white hair and scars on his face. His left eye was covered with a patch. He walked with the confidence of someone who had been giving orders for a long time. "Daniel Harper," the man said. "I am Victor Cole. Welcome to the Ember." "The Ember?" Daniel repeated. "That is what we call ourselves, because even the smallest ember can start a fire that burns down an empire." Victor gestured for Daniel to follow him. "Come, we have much to discuss." They walked through the underground base. Victor explained as they went. "We started building this network 12 years ago, right after the invasion ended. Some of us were soldiers who survived the war. Others were scientists, engineers, pilots. We knew that fighting the Cathari directly was suicide. Their technology was too advanced. Their numbers were too great. So we decided to fight a different kind of war. They passed a group of people studying star charts. Another group was assembling weapons from parts that looked Cathari in design. We put people in every position we could reach. Victor continued. In the mines, in the factories, in the transport ships, even in the Cathari facilities themselves. We learned their language. We studied their technology. We found their weaknesses. What weaknesses? Daniel asked. They seem unbeatable. Victor stopped walking and turned to face him. Every empire has weaknesses, Daniel. The Cathari are proud. Their entire society is built on honor and public displays of strength. To be humiliated, especially in front of others, is worse than death to them. That is their weakness. He led Daniel to a large screen showing an image of a massive ship. The ship was beautiful in a terrible way, covered in gold and decorated with symbols. This is the Throne of Stars, Victor said. The personal flagship of Emperor Veloth himself. 6 days from now, Commander Zealida is scheduled to give a report to the Emperor aboard this ship. Every noble house in the Cathari Empire will be watching. Every military commander. Every important figure in their civilization. Daniel began to understand. You want to do something during this report? Victor nodded. We are going to destroy Zealida's ship right in front of the Emperor. We are going to show the entire empire that humans are not broken. That we can reach out and strike them whenever we choose. And then we are going to send a message to every species they have conquered. A message? The Cathari rule over 30 different species. Some of them have been slaves for thousands of years. They have forgotten that resistance is possible. We are going to remind them. Victor led Daniel to another part of the base. A woman sat at a communication station surrounded by screens and equipment. She was in her 40s, with short red hair and quick fingers that danced across keyboards. This is Helen Morris, Victor said. She was a broadcast engineer before the invasion. She has spent the last 10 years building a system that can override Cathari communications. Helen looked up and nodded at Daniel. When Zealida's ship explodes, every screen in the Empire will show what we want them to see. Every subjugated species will hear our words. The Cathari will not be able to stop it. Daniel's mind was spinning. This was bigger than he had imagined. This was not just about New Haven or about what happened to Lucy. This was about changing everything. Where is Grace? He asked. The woman who was arrested today. Victor smiled. Grace Bennett is my second in command. She has been running our operations in Sector 7 for 8 years. Her arrest was not an accident. What do you mean? We needed a reason to act. We needed something that would make people angry, that would make them ready to fight. What Zealida did to your daughter gave us that reason. Grace stepping forward and being arrested gave us a martyr. Everything is happening exactly as we planned. Daniel felt a strange mix of emotions. He was grateful that there were people fighting back. But he was also angry that his daughter had been used as part of a plan. Victor seemed to understand. I am sorry about what happened to Lucy. We did not plan for her to be hurt. But when it happened, we had to use it. That is the reality of war. You can hate me for it if you want. But ask yourself this. Would you rather your daughter's pain mean nothing? Or would you rather it be the spark that lights a fire across the galaxy? Daniel thought about his wife dying in a labor camp. He thought about 12 years of bowing his head and swallowing his anger. He thought about Lucy's bruised face. What do you need me to do? He asked. Victor put a hand on his shoulder. For now, I need you to go home and be with your daughter. When the time comes, Samuel will bring you back here. You will have a part to play before this is over. Daniel nodded. He had come to this place looking for answers. He had found something much bigger. He had found hope. As Samuel led him back through the tunnels toward the surface. Daniel thought about Grace Bennett sitting in a Kethari prison cell. He thought about the quiet network of resistance fighters hiding in plain sight across the colony. He thought about the massive operation that was about to begin. The Kethari thought they had broken humanity. They thought humans had accepted their place as slaves. They were wrong. Beneath the surface, in the shadows, in the hearts of people who had pretended to be defeated, a fire had been growing for 12 years, and in 6 days, that fire was going to burn. Daniel emerged from the hidden entrance and walked through the dark streets toward home. The stars above him seemed brighter than they had in years. For the first time since the invasion, he felt something he had almost forgotten how to feel. He felt like a free man. 3 days had passed since Daniel learned about the Ember. Grace Bennett was still in the Kethari Processing Center. But according to Victor Cole, that was about to change. Daniel sat in the underground base, surrounded by people he had never known existed. Miners, factory workers, cooks, cleaners, all of them had been living double lives. By day, they were obedient servants of the Kethari Empire. By night, they were soldiers in a secret war. Victor stood at the front of the room, pointing at a map on a large screen. The map showed the processing center where Grace was being held. It was a gray building on the edge of the colony, surrounded by walls and guarded by automated systems. The Kethari trust their technology too much, Victor explained. They use machines to watch their prisoners because they think machines cannot be fooled. They are wrong. A young man stood up from his seat. He was about 25 years old, thin and nervous-looking, with glasses that kept sliding down his nose. His name was Peter Walsh. I have worked as a maintenance technician in Kethari facilities for 5 years, Peter said. I have memorized every code, every patrol pattern, every camera angle. I know where the blind spots are. I know how to make the machines see what I want them to see. Victor nodded. Peter will lead the team that frees Grace. They will go in tomorrow night. If everything goes according to plan, she will be back with us before sunrise. Daniel raised his hand. And then what? Even if we free her, how do we get a ship close enough to destroy Xylitha? Victor smiled. It was not a happy smile. It was the smile of someone who had been planning something terrible for a very long time. Let me introduce you to Nathan Cross. An old man stood up from the back of the room. He was in his 60s, with gray hair and a face lined with wrinkles. His shoulders were bent, and he moved slowly, like every step cost him effort. But his eyes were sharp and clear. I was a pilot before the invasion, Nathan said. His voice was rough, but steady. I flew cargo ships between Earth and the colonies. When the Kethari came, I tried to fight. My ship was one of the last to go down. He paused. They captured me and put me in the mining pits. 10 years of breathing toxic dust. The doctors tell me I have 6 months to live, maybe less. The radiation has eaten away at my lungs. Daniel felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. He understood what was coming. I have a son, Nathan continued. Had a son. He joined the resistance when he was 18. 3 years ago, the Kethari caught him. They made an example of him in the central square. His voice did not shake, but there was something terrible in his eyes. I have nothing left to lose. I have 6 months of pain waiting for me if I do nothing. I would rather those months mean something. Victor walked over to a covered shape in the corner of the room. He pulled off the covering to reveal a model of a ship. It looked ordinary, like any cargo hauler that moved goods between colonies. This is the ship we have been building in secret for 4 years, Victor said. On the outside, it looks like a standard mining transport. The Kethari scanners will see nothing unusual. But inside, it carries enough explosive material to destroy a warship. He pointed to a spot on the star chart. In 3 days, Commander Xylitha will travel to Keth Prime to give her report to Emperor Veloth. Her ship, the Velanther, will approach the throne of stars and dock with it. Thousands of Cathari nobles will be watching. It will be the perfect moment. But how does Nathan get close enough? Someone asked. They will scan any ship that approaches. Peter Walsh stood up again. I have been studying their scanning protocols for years. There is a window during the docking process when their security is focused on the main approach lane. A ship coming from a different angle, moving at the right speed, would not trigger their alarms until it was too late. Victor nodded. Nathan will hide his ship among the commercial traffic near Keth Prime. He will wait until exactly the right moment, then change course and accelerate toward the Volanther. By the time they realize what is happening, it will be over. Daniel looked at Nathan. The old man was going to die. He was going to fly a bomb into an enemy ship and never come back. And he was talking about it like he was discussing the weather. Are you sure about this? Daniel asked him. Nathan met his eyes. I watched my son die because I could not save him. I have spent 3 years living with that failure. This is my chance to do something that matters. To hurt the people who hurt him. To show them that humans do not forget. He smiled, and for a moment he looked young again. Besides, I have always wanted to go out with a bang. The room was silent. There was nothing more to say. Victor cleared his throat. The ship attack is only part of the plan. The second part is the message. Helen? Helen Morris walked to the front of the room. She carried a small device that she connected to the main screen. A web of lines appeared, connecting hundreds of points across a map of the galaxy. The Cathari communication network is the most advanced in the known universe, Helen said. Every ship, every colony, every planet is connected to it. Messages can travel from one end of the empire to the other in seconds. She pressed a button and the screen changed. Now it showed this same network, but with red lines running through it. I have spent 10 years finding the weak points in this network. I have planted code and relay stations across 12 systems. When I activate it, every screen in the Empire will show our broadcast. Every Cathari, every slave of every species, will see what we want them to see. What will they see? Daniel asked. Helen looked at Victor. Victor looked at the door at the back of the room. They will see me, said a voice. Grace Bennett walked into the room. She was bruised and tired, her clothes torn, but she was alive. Peter Walsh stood behind her, grinning. The rescue had happened hours ago, and Daniel had not even known. The room erupted in cheers. People rushed to embrace Grace, to welcome her back. She accepted their greetings with a tired smile, then made her way to the front of the room. The Cathari have ruled this part of the galaxy for 3,000 years, Grace said. In that time, they have conquered and enslaved 30 species. They have taught those species that resistance is impossible, that the Cathari are gods who cannot be challenged. She paused. We are going to teach them something different. She looked around the room at the faces watching her. When Nathan's ship destroys the Volanther, Helen will broadcast my message to the entire Empire. I will tell them what the Cathari did to a 7-year-old human girl. I will tell them that we struck back. I will tell them that their masters can bleed, that their ships can burn, that empires can fall. Her voice grew stronger. 30 species are living under Cathari rule right now. Most of them have given up hope. But hope is like a seed. It only needs a small crack in the ground to start growing. Our message will be that crack. Our attack will be the proof that resistance is possible. Daniel thought about Lucy. He thought about the bruise on her face that was slowly healing. He thought about Commander Zelida laughing in the market. What happens after? He asked. After the attack, after the message. The Cathari will come for revenge. Victor stepped forward. They will. They will send ships to destroy us. But by then, we will not be alone. We have all eyes on other worlds. We have contacts in other species. When they see what we have done, they will rise too. He put his hand on Daniel's shoulder. You asked what you could do. Here is your answer. When the attack happens, New Haven needs to be ready. We have weapons hidden throughout the colony. We have ships disguised as mining vessels. When the Cathari retaliation comes, we will fight them. And we will win. Daniel looked around the room at the tired, determined faces of people who had been waiting 12 years for this moment. I am ready, he said. Nathan Cross walked over to him. The old man held out his hand. Daniel took it. When you see my ship explode, Nathan said, think of every human who died in the invasion. Think of every person the Cathari have taken from us. Think of your daughter. His grip was surprisingly strong. And then fight like hell. Daniel nodded. He could not speak. The weight of the moment was too heavy for words. In 3 days, everything would change. A dying man would fly into fire. A woman would speak words that would echo across the galaxy. And on a small colony called New Haven, a father would pick up a weapon and fight for his daughter's future. The impossible plan was about to begin. Emperor Veloth was the oldest living Cathari. He had ruled the empire for 900 years, watching it grow from a collection of planets to a power that controlled half the galaxy. He had conquered dozens of species. He had crushed rebellions that most people had forgotten ever happened. He had seen everything. Or so he thought. The Emperor sat on his throne aboard the Throne of Stars, the greatest ship ever built. It was 3 miles long and covered in gold that had been taken from 100 conquered worlds. The throne room alone was larger than most buildings, with high ceilings decorated with the skulls of enemy leaders. 1,000 nobles filled the chamber, standing in their finest clothes, waiting to hear the reports from the outer sectors. Today was presentation day, when commanders from across the empire came to report on their territories. It was a ceremony that had not changed in thousands of years. Commanders would tell the emperor how well they had crushed their subjects. The emperor would nod. The nobles would applaud. Everyone would go home feeling good about their eternal power. Commander Xylitha's ship, the Velanther, approached the Throne of Stars right on schedule. The warship was impressive, with sharp angles and weapons that could destroy a city in seconds. It moved through space like a predator, proud and deadly. Xylitha stood on the bridge of her ship, preparing her report. She was thinking about the words she would say to the Emperor. She would tell him about human productivity in Sector 7. She would tell him about the quiet obedience of the slaves. She would not mention the incident in the market with the child. It was not important enough to bother the Emperor with such details. She had no idea that she was about to become the most famous Cathari in history. Famous for all the wrong reasons. Thousands of miles away, hidden among the commercial traffic near Keth Prime, a cargo hauler drifted with its engines barely running. Anyone who looked at it would see nothing special. Just another mining transport waiting for clearance to deliver its goods. Inside that ship, Nathan Cross sat alone in the pilot's seat. He was not afraid. That surprised him. He had expected to feel terror in these final hours. Instead, he felt calm. His hands were steady on the controls. His breathing was slow and even. The pain in his lungs, the constant reminder that he was dying, seemed far away. A photograph was taped to his console. It showed a young man with brown hair and a big smile. His son. The Cathari had killed him in front of a crowd to send a message. Today, Nathan was going to send a message of his own. His communication device crackled. Victor Cole's voice came through, distant and full of static. Nathan, can you hear me? Loud and clear. The Velanther is approaching the Throne of Stars. Docking will begin in 20 minutes. You know what to do. Nathan looked out the window at the distant shapes of Cathari warships. So many of them. So powerful. And yet, in a few minutes, One human in a broken cargo ship would hurt them in a way they had never been hurt before. "I know what to do," Nathan said. "Tell the others I said goodbye. Tell them to make this count. We will. We will never forget what you are doing today." Nathan smiled. "Good, because I am about to do something unforgettable." He turned off the communication device. He did not need any more words. Everything that needed to be said had been said. Now it was time for action. He watched the screens and waited for the perfect moment. On board the Throne of Stars, Commander Xylitha's image appeared on the giant screens of the throne room. She bowed her head toward the Emperor, showing proper respect. "My Emperor," she began, "I bring news from Sector 7. The human colonies continue to serve the Empire with proper obedience. Production in the mines has increased by 3%. There have been no significant incidents of resistance." Emperor Veloth barely listened. He had heard the same report 1,000 times from 1,000 different commanders. Humans were weak. Humans were broken. Humans would serve the Empire forever. Nothing ever changed. At that exact moment, Nathan Cross pushed his engines to maximum power. The cargo hauler shot forward like an arrow. In seconds, it went from drifting slowly to moving faster than anything in the area. Alarms started screaming on Kithari security vessels. Officers shouted orders. Ships began to turn, but they were too late. Nathan had calculated everything perfectly. He had studied the traffic patterns for months. He knew exactly when the security ships would be looking the other direction. By the time they realized what was happening, he was already past them. Xylitha saw it on her bridge screens. A small ship coming straight at the Velanther at impossible speed. Her officers were shouting. Her weapons were trying to lock on. But there was no time. There was never going to be enough time. Nathan looked at the photograph of his son one last time. "This is for you," he whispered. The cargo hauler hit the Velanther. In the middle of its hull, the explosion was the brightest thing anyone had ever seen. The Velanther, one of the most powerful warships in the Kethari fleet, broke apart like glass. Fire and metal flew in all directions. Pieces of the ship scattered across space, burning as they tumbled through the void. From the surface of Keth Prime, millions of people looked up and saw a new star appear in the sky. It was the fire of the Velanther dying. In the throne room of the Throne of Stars, silence fell. Emperor Veloth rose from his throne, his ancient face showing an emotion that his subjects had never seen before. Shock. Pure. Complete shock. Then every screen in the room flickered and changed. The image of Commander Xylitha disappeared. In her place stood a human woman with gray hair and calm eyes. Grace Bennett looked into the camera with no fear on her face. "To every species living under Kethari rule," she said, her voice clear and strong. "We are the humans of Earth. We have something important to tell you." The nobles in the throne room began to shout. Guards tried to shut off the screens. But Helen Morris had done her job well. The broadcast could not be stopped. It was playing on every screen in the Empire, on every ship, on every planet, in every home. 6 days ago, a Kethari commander named Xylitha struck a 7-year-old human child. She hit her across the face because the child was too scared to move. She did this because she believed humans were too weak to fight back. She was wrong. Grace paused, letting the words sink in across 1 billion screens. The ship you just saw explode was Commander Xylitha's ship, the Velanther. A single human pilot destroyed it. One person, one ship, one act of courage. That is all it took to turn the pride of the Kethari fleet into burning wreckage. Emperor Veloth stood frozen. Around him, his nobles were panicking. Some were trying to leave. Others were staring at the screens in horror. The greatest gathering of Kethari power in the galaxy, and they were helpless to stop one human woman from speaking. The Cathari have ruled you for thousands of years, Grace continued. They have told you that resistance is impossible. They have told you that they cannot be beaten. They have told you that you are weak and they are strong. Her voice grew harder. They lied. On 100 different worlds, slaves stopped their work and watched. The Threll, the Makai, the Vorn, species that had served the Cathari for generations, they all heard the same words. They all saw the same fire in the sky. We are humanity. We were conquered 12 years ago, but we never stopped fighting. We built a resistance in the shadows. We learned their weaknesses. We waited for the right moment. And today, we struck. Grace stepped closer to the camera. To the other species watching this, you are not alone. Resistance is possible. The Cathari can be hurt. Their ships can burn. Their commanders can die. If one small ship can destroy a warship in front of their emperor, imagine what we could do together. She spoke her final words slowly, making sure everyone understood. We do not forget what they have done to us. We do not forgive. And we are no longer afraid. Today is the first day of a new era. Today is the day the Empire begins to fall. The screen went dark dot in the throne room of the Throne of Stars. Emperor Veloth finally found his voice. Find them, he hissed. Find them and destroy them. Every human. Every colony. Every planet. Burn them all. His commanders rushed to obey. Ships began moving toward human colonies across the sector. The retaliation would be terrible, but as the orders went out, strange things started happening. The Thrall garrison on Kelos Prime reported that half their troops were refusing to follow orders. The Makai, who controlled the fuel supplies for the fleet, said there had been accidents at several major depots. The Vorn messengers, who carried orders between ships, had simply disappeared. The fire that Nathan Cross had lit with his death was spreading faster than anyone could have imagined. On New Haven, Daniel Harper watched Grace's message on a screen in the underground base. When it ended, he picked up a weapon for the first time in his life. Victor Cole stood before the assembled fighters, humans who had been waiting 12 years for this moment. They will come for us, Victor said. They will send everything they have. But we are ready, and we are not alone. He pointed to the sky, where new lights were appearing. Ships were arriving, but they did not carry Cathari markings. They carried the symbols of a dozen different species, allies, people who had seen Grace's message and chosen to act. Daniel thought about Nathan Cross, the dying man who had chosen to live his last moments in fire. He thought about Grace, whose words were, "The first Cathari warships appeared in the sky above New Haven 3 hours after the Valenther was destroyed. They came in formation, 80 ships of various sizes, enough firepower to turn the entire colony into ash. Their weapons were charged. Their orders were clear. No survivors, but New Haven was not the helpless colony they expected." Daniel Harper stood on the roof of an old factory building, watching the ships descend through the atmosphere. His hands held a plasma rifle that Samuel Price had given him. His heart was beating fast, but his hands were steady. Around him, hundreds of other humans were taking up positions throughout the colony. Weapons that had been hidden for years were now in the open. Defense systems that had been built in secret were coming online. Victor Cole's voice came through a communication device in Daniel's ear. They are sending landing parties to the eastern quarter. They want to make examples of us before they destroy the colony. That is their mistake. The first Cathari soldiers touched down in the market square, the same square where Commander Xylitha had struck Lucy just days ago. They expected to find terrified humans running and screaming. Instead, they found empty streets and silence. Then the shooting started. Humans appeared on rooftops and in windows, firing down at the soldiers from every direction. The Cathari were caught completely off guard. They had never faced organized human resistance before. They did not know how to react. Daniel fired his weapon for the first time in his life. He did not think about the fact that he was killing. He thought about Lucy. He thought about Maria dying in a labor camp. He thought about 12 years of bowing his head and swallowing his rage. The weapon kicked against his shoulder, and somewhere below, a Cathari soldier fell. The battle spread across the colony. Cathari reinforcements landed in different locations, but everywhere they went, they found humans waiting for them. The miners, the factory workers, the cooks and cleaners, all of them had become soldiers. All of them had been waiting for this day. In orbit above New Haven, the Cathari commanders watched their ground forces struggle and made a decision. If the humans would not die on the ground, they would die from above. The warships began to move into bombardment position. That was when the hidden ships appeared. 12 vessels that had been disguised as mining transports rose from the surface of the colony. Their false hulls fell away, revealing weapons and armor that the Cathari did not know humans possessed. But they did not fight alone. More ships arrived through hyperspace. Ships from other systems, carrying fighters from other species. The Threll, whose reptilian warriors had served as Cathari auxiliaries for centuries, had sent 3 cruisers crewed by soldiers who had finally chosen to rebel. The Makai, the aquatic beings who controlled the Empire's fuel supplies, had come in their strange bubble-shaped vessels. Even a group of Vorn winged creatures who had served as messengers were flying small attack craft. Grace Bennett's message had worked. The fire was spreading. The space battle was fierce. Cathari ships were powerful, but they were fighting enemies on multiple fronts. Their formation broke apart as they tried to respond to attacks from different directions. Human and allied ships worked together, covering each other, striking weak points that the resistance had identified years ago. On the surface, Daniel and the other fighters watched the lights in the sky. Explosions flashed like lightning. Ships tumbled and burned. It was impossible to tell who was winning. Then, Victor's voice came through the communication device again. The enemy flagship is retreating. They are calling for reinforcements, but reinforcements are not coming. Reports from across the sector say that other species are rising up. The Cathari cannot send more ships because they need them everywhere else. A cheer went up from the humans in the streets. But Victor's voice turned serious. We are not done yet. There are still enemy soldiers on the ground. We need to clear them out before we can call this a victory. Daniel moved through the colony with a group of other fighters. They went building by building, street by street, pushing the remaining Cathari forces toward the edge of the settlement. The aliens fought hard, but they were surrounded and outnumbered. For the first time in 12 years, humans had the advantage. The battle lasted 17 hours. When the sun rose the next morning, New Haven was still standing. 87 Cathari ships drifted as wreckage in orbit. The remaining enemy vessels had fled into hyperspace, carrying reports of defeat back to there. Emperor Daniel sat on the steps of his home as the morning light spread across the colony. His body hurt in places he did not know could hurt. His hands were burned from the heat of his weapon. His throat was raw from shouting orders, but he was alive. And more importantly, he was free. Lucy came running out of the shelter where she had been hiding with the other children. She threw herself into her father's arms, crying and laughing at the same time. Is it over? She asked. Are the bad aliens gone? Daniel held her tight. He could feel her heartbeat against his chest, fast and strong. The bruise on her face had faded to yellow and green. It would be gone soon, but the memory of what caused it and what came after would last forever. They are gone from New Haven, Daniel said. But there are more of them out there. This war is not over yet. Lucy looked up at him with her serious brown eyes. Will we win? Daniel thought about all the things that had happened in the past week. He thought about Grace Bennett speaking to the entire galaxy. He thought about Nathan Cross flying into fire with his son's photograph beside him. He thought about species that had been slaves for thousands of years finally standing up to fight. "I think we will," he said. "I think we will." On the other side of the colony, Victor Cole and Grace Bennett stood on a hill overlooking the damage. Smoke rose from burned buildings. Debris was scattered everywhere. But people were already starting to clean up, to rebuild. Humans were good at rebuilding. "Reports are coming in from across the sector," Grace said. 12 more colonies have risen up. The Cathari are pulling back to defend their core systems. For the first time in 3,000 years, they are actually afraid. Victor nodded slowly. His face was tired but satisfied. He had spent 12 years planning for this moment. Now it was finally here. What happens now? Grace asked. Victor looked up at the stars. Somewhere out there, Emperor Veloth was sitting on his golden throne, surrounded by his nobles, trying to understand how everything had gone so wrong so fast. Somewhere out there, slaves who had never imagined freedom were starting to hope. Somewhere out there, the Empire was beginning to crack. "Now we finish what we started," Victor said. "We push them back. We free the other species. We show the galaxy that no empire lasts forever." Grace smiled. It was the same smile she had worn in the market square when Xylitha arrested her. The smile of someone who knew exactly what was coming. "Then let us get to work." They walked back toward the center of the colony, where humans and allies from other species were already meeting to plan the next phase of the war. There was so much to do, so many battles still to fight. But for the first time in 12 years, they were fighting on their own terms. That night, the people of New Haven gathered in the market square. The same square where Lucy had been struck. The same square where Grace had been arrested. Someone had built a small monument there, a pile of stones with names carved into them. Names of people who had died in the invasion. Names of people who had died in the resistance. And at the top, a new name. Nathan Cross. Daniel stood before the monument with Lucy at his side. Around them, hundreds of humans stood in silence, remembering what they had lost and celebrating what they had won. Victor Cole spoke. A few words about sacrifice and courage and the long road ahead. Grace Bennett told him about the messages of support coming from other worlds. Helen Morris showed them footage of Cathari nobles panicking in the throne room as they watched the Valanther burn. But the moment that Daniel would remember forever came at the end. Lucy stepped forward and placed her cloth ball at the base of the monument. The same ball she had been chasing when Xylitha struck her. The ball that had started everything. "Thank you," she said quietly, looking at Nathan's name. "Thank you for fighting for us." The crowd was silent. Above them, the stars shone down on a galaxy that was changing. The Cathari Empire, which had stood for 3,000 years, was beginning to fall. And the species they had called weak, the humans who were supposed to be broken, were leading the way. Daniel put his hand on Lucy's shoulder and looked up at the sky. Somewhere out there, the fire was still spreading. Somewhere out there, slaves were becoming free. Somewhere out there, the future was being written. And for the first time in 12 years, Daniel Harper believed that future would be worth living in. The war was not over. There would be more battles, more sacrifices, more names added to monuments across 100 worlds. But on this night, in this place, the people of New Haven allowed themselves to hope. They had struck the Empire before its emperor. They had shattered a commander's ship in front of the entire galaxy. They had proven that humans would never be slaves, and that was just the beginning.